In the shining castles of medieval France, kings and queens lived with gold, power, and unimaginable luxury. Their palaces sparkled, their robes glittered, and their crowns shone with jewels. But behind this image of beauty and strength was a secret so disturbing that it still shocks us today. Many French royals, including kings who ruled entire nations, almost never bathed. In fact, some of them were known to wash only 2 or 3 times in their entire lifetime. How could the most powerful men and women in Europe live like this? To understand, we must go back to the Middle Ages, a time when bathing was not considered healthy but dangerous. In the 13th and 14th centuries, doctors in Europe often advised that water opened the pores of the body and made people weak against diseases. They believed that if you washed too often, sickness could easily enter through your skin. Cleanliness, in their eyes, was not about bathing in water, but about covering the body with perfumes, oils, and layers of clothing. And so, in the royal courts of France, luxury baths became rare, while scented powders, strong perfumes, and heavy robes became the substitute for hygiene. One of the most famous examples comes from King Louis XIV, the Sun King. He ruled France for more than 70 years and built the magnificent Palace of Versailles. His palace had hundreds of fountains, golden halls, and glittering chandeliers. Yet Louis himself is said to have hated bathing. Historical accounts suggest that he bathed perhaps 2 or 3 times in his life. Instead, he covered himself in heavy perfumes and wore layers of silk and velvet. When people met him, they smelled the fragrance of roses and musk, but underneath was a body that had rarely touched water. And Louis was not alone. Many French royals followed the same habits. King Louis XIII, his father, was said to be terrified of bathing. He preferred to rub his body with linen cloths instead of using water. Even queens were no exception. Some medieval queens who wore layers of gowns, corsets, and wigs believed that perfumes were enough to hide any odor. Doctors even recommended bathing only once or twice a year at most. Imagine the royal court at Versailles or Paris. Hundreds of nobles dressed in silks, wigs powdered with flour, faces painted with lead-based makeup, and bodies never washed. The smell inside the halls must have been overwhelming. To mask it, the royals filled their rooms with incense, carried perfumed handkerchiefs, and sprayed flowers everywhere. Clean water was seen as a danger, while perfume was considered protection. The irony is painful. These were the rulers of Europe, the symbols of elegance and refinement, yet they lived in conditions that today would be considered unthinkable. Behind their golden crowns, their personal hygiene was worse than the poorest peasants of their time, who often bathed in rivers and streams. But there were consequences. Many royals suffered from terrible skin diseases, infections, and rotting teeth. Louis XIV himself had such bad dental problems that he lost most of his teeth by middle age. His mouth smelled so terrible that ambassadors often stood at a distance when speaking to him. Yet the king was still considered the most powerful monarch of his age. This strange habit of avoiding baths lasted for centuries in France. It was not until the 18th and 19th centuries that attitudes began to change. As science advanced, doctors realized that water was not dangerous but healthy. Bathhouses returned, soap was improved, and eventually regular bathing became part of European life. But by then, the reputation of French royals was already filled with stories of bad hygiene. Some historians even say that this habit became one of the many reasons people grew to resent the monarchy. While peasants starved in filth, they also mocked the royals, who, despite living in palaces, smelled just as bad. When the French Revolution erupted in 1789, it was not only about politics, but also about disgust at the lifestyle of kings and queens. The story of France's unwashed royals reminds us that history is full of contradictions. The same kings who built the most beautiful palaces in the world also lived in filth. The same queens who were dressed in jewels also suffered from diseases caused by dirt and perfume. It shows us that power and beauty often hide disturbing truths. Today, when tourists visit Versailles, they see gold, mirrors, and gardens. They imagine elegance and grace. But hidden in that beauty is a forgotten truth. The Sun King himself may have ruled for 7 decades without ever knowing the feeling of a real bath. And that is the dark reality of medieval royalty. They ruled with crowns of gold, but lived with the smell of rot, perfume, and secrets. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with your friends, and write your comments below. In our next video, we will uncover another shocking royal secret that history tried to hide.